Hi, everyone. Welcome, and thank you so much for being here today. We're gathering in this digital space to participate in a workshop and artist talk with Alexis Bulman and Aislinn Thomas. My name is Hannah Keating. I'm the assistant curator at Artspace, an artist-run center located in the community known as Nogojibonan by some and Peterborough by others. Artspace has existed as an uninvited guest on the traditional territory of the Mississauga Anishinaabe since 1974. Collectively known as the Williams Treaty First Nations, these communities include Curve Lake, Hiawatha, Alderville, Scugog Island, Rama, Beausoleil, and Georgina Island First Nations. The Anishinaabe are the traditional caretakers of this territory, and as a settler-led organization, we are grateful to work and exist here and are committed to reinforcing our gratitude through ongoing actions. This workshop is presented alongside an exhibition of new work by Alexis Bulman called Makeshift at Artspace. So the exhibition will be exhibited on site at Artspace from September 11th to October 24th, 2020. It is also available in its entirety as a digital exhibition on the Artspace website. So if you're able to come into the gallery, please do so. And if not, take some time to explore the show on our website. And I hope that you can also join us in participating in this workshop developed by Aislinn Thomas. So I'd like to start the workshop by providing a visual description of myself. As I said, I'm Hannah. I have pale skin with freckles. I have straight strawberry blonde hair and it's pulled back in a ponytail. I'm wearing gold glasses and a plain black t-shirt and gold geometric dangle earrings. So I am joined on screen today with two artists, Alexis Bulman and Aislinn Thomas, as well as an ASL interpreter. The interpreter is wearing a blue shirt and has her hair pulled back in a ponytail and is wearing a necklace. I'm going to go ahead and introduce the artists now as well and provide them an opportunity to provide their own visual description. So Alexis Bulman is a Prince Edward Island born artist with a studio practice currently based in Montreal, Quebec. After acquiring her BFA from NSCAD University in 2013, she began developing an artistic practice as a facilitator, a collaborator, a builder of sculptures, installations, performances, and video works. Employing methodologies informed by her diagnosis of double curvature scoliosis, Bulman translates the patterns of her physical movement and bodily occupation of space into visual form. Her work has been exhibited across Eastern Ontario, Quebec, and Ontario in site-specific installations and in galleries such as Eye Level Gallery, the Confederation Centre Art Gallery, and the Robert McLaughlin Gallery. She's also completed numerous residencies, including most recently at Oboro and Spectrum Productions in Montreal, Quebec, as a contributor to the Interrogating Access series. So Alexis, I wonder if you can just give us a quick description of yourself.
Yeah, I am a white woman in her late 20s. I have short, dark blonde hair, blue eyes, and I am wearing a sort of lightly polka-dotted shirt in a blue color, and I'm wearing denim overalls.
Okay, thank you so much. We're also joined today by Aislinn Thomas. Aislinn is an interdisciplinary artist whose practice includes video, performance, sculpture, installation, and text. She culls materials from everyday experiences and relationships, creating work that ranges from poignant to absurd, and sometimes a combination of both. Her recent works explore the generative nature of disability while pushing up against conventional access measures. Recent exhibitions have been staged in Poland with Artspace and Tangled Art Plus Disability in Toronto, Flux Factory in Queens, New York, and a commission as well for the Walter Phillips Gallery at the Banff Centre for Arts and Creativity in Banff, Alberta. Aislinn, if you want to jump in now and provide a visual description as well.
Sure. I'm a white cis woman in my late 30s, and I have short-ish curly auburn hair. And today I'm wearing a sleeveless red blouse with tiny white polka dots. And I don't have my glasses on right now, but I may need to put on my sunglasses at some point. And you may also see me looking away from the screen at times during the presentation, and that's just what I have to do as part of my access needs. And today I'm joining you from a yellow room in my apartment in Kitchener, Ontario, which is on the traditional territory of the neutral Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee people. And this land that's on either side of the Grand River was promised to the Six Nations in 1784, but the agreement has not been honored.
All right, thank you so much, both of you, for those introductions. So Alexis, I think we'll start with you. For the exhibition Makeshift, you're presenting two new bodies of work, Tending To and the Remodel series. I'm just wondering if you can give us a brief introduction into how this work came to be, and maybe some of the ideas that we were hoping to explore through this new work.
Sure. So to explain how Tending To and the Remodel series came to be, I have to give some background information. So as it was mentioned in my biography, I have scoliosis, which is a curvature of the spine. And to make a very long story short, the advice of my specialist ultimately is sort of to know my limits and to not overdo it. And that is very abstract advice that I still don't know how to interpret. I never know where my limits are until I've overdone it, which usually means to overexert myself physically, causing back pain. And so that's relevant information to the art that I made for this exhibition, because the sort of art that I love to make is durational performances and building sculptures and installations that are sort of large and labor intensive, which is sort of the physicality of that kind of art making is directly at odds with sort of the needs of my body. So in recent years, I've begun making artwork about these experiences, and it has created an opportunity for me to take better care of myself and learn more about my body through my artwork. But it's also changed the way I think about art and how I approach art making, and where I want to disseminate my artwork so that it is more accessible. And so leading up to the Makeshift exhibition, I participated in a 9-month-long interrogating access residency. And during that residency, I sort of created an objective for myself, which was to, I guess, experiment with tools that could stimulate accessible encounters through media art. And off the bat, I chose to explore audio description and 360-degree product photography technology, because I thought these were sort of two avenues that could increase accessibility in the kind of artwork I was already producing. So through this residency and those sort of objectives I set for myself, I'd ended up establishing a sort of set of 4 parameters I could kind of play with, or a kind of guide for creating art through a lens of accessibility, as opposed to making art and then thinking about accessibility at the end. And so those parameters are sort of 4. There's 4 of them. The first one was audio description and 360-degree photography would elevate engagement beyond the gallery. The second parameter was I wanted my primary material to be drywall. And 3, my body would inform the process and sort of determine the working conditions for my creative process. And the 4th parameter was sort of conceptually, I would try to point out or highlight barriers in the gallery and offer imagined alternatives. So from the set of parameters, I ended up creating Tending To and the Remodel series. I'll probably talk more about Tending To later on in this conversation, so I'll talk about Remodel really quickly. The Remodel sculptures are made of drywall. There are 5 of them in total. And drywall is a really heavy, messy material. So I had to work on these sculptures in really, really short increments of time over many, many months. And in addition to, I guess, thinking about my own body while I was making these sculptures, I had to think about the sculptures as if they were already 360-degree photographs, because I knew that would be the technology that would help them be shared beyond the gallery. And for context, a 360 photograph is a series of images of an object, or in my case, a sculpture, a series of sculptures, that is photographed on a rotating table from every angle. And then in a browser, a person can view these images by rotating and panning around the object and zooming in. So with this technology in mind, I had to consider the sculptures from every imaginable composition or angle. And I had to account for the fact that by zooming in, my viewers would be able to kind of uncover more information than they even might in person. And so if they zoom in, that information, that detail really had to be there. And so it was important to build these sculptures in a way so that the tactility of the drywall material felt almost exaggerated and just rich. And it had to really compete with the flatness of a photograph, even if that photograph is 360 degrees. Yeah, I guess for me, the goal of these sculptures was to make them engaging to look at, exciting to feel, and I wanted them to be fun to describe. But I ended up creating this entire series in isolation and haven't had a chance to talk to anybody really about them other than the 2 of you. So that's why I'm so excited to sort of watch Aislinn's workshop unfold.
Yeah, I am too. It's exciting to hear you talk about as well. I think by thinking about accessibility at the beginning, how much that has shaped the work that you've come up with in the end. And from my perspective, in terms of presenting the work, one of the things I really wanted to think about was the visitor and their sort of unique impression and interpretation of the work that you've created. And that's why I brought Aislinn on board, because of her experience with different descriptive practices and in this area. So Aislinn, I think we'll get to the workshop in a minute, but I thought that you could just give us a brief review of the work that you've done related to disability and access, and specifically about your experience with descriptive practices.
Yeah, of course. So back in 2016, I had a video of mine described by a professional audio describer, and I found myself just feeling really dissatisfied with the results. But before I share more about that, I want to talk about what audio description is, just to make sure that we're all on the same page. So I think of audio description as being under a larger umbrella of visual description, which is a set of practices that aims to make visual information and experience available through spoken language. And so as you can imagine, this is generally intended for the blind and low vision community, although lots of other people use it as well. And it includes a lot of different things, actually, including live description, which I was so excited to learn about when I did, and that happens in theater and conference settings. And also, you know, we can imagine it happening in a guided tour situation, as well as alt text, which you may be familiar with, which is read by screen readers online. And there are lots of other examples, but the term audio description just refers to any visual description that's recorded in audio. And then to situate myself to these visual description practices, I'm a sometimes user of description. That's usually how I describe myself. And I would actually like to use it more frequently than I do, but description usually isn't available for the contemporary art pieces that I want to experience or need to experience that way. And yeah, and just to help you understand that better, I describe myself as someone who thrives in low stimulation environments, so places that are quiet and dimly lit. And what I can see is very contextual, because I'm just quite sensitive to light and motion and sound and other things. So at the same time, I have access to an awful lot of visual experience, especially when I can set up my environment in a certain way. So working with description is in many ways an act of cross-disability solidarity for me. And it's been super important to consult with people who frequently use audio description. So with all that background, back to this description that I had commissioned for my this video, I was really disappointed, and there were a lot of things that kind of, I don't know, stuck out to me. I was disappointed by the opaque process of who chose what was important enough to describe, and also what was not, in order to keep up with the video. A lot got left out, and also how things were described and the way people were described didn't seem especially thoughtful, and the delivery and tone of voice to me felt out of keeping with the content of the video, to the point of it being quite distracting. And others have noticed these things about standard description as well. And if you're curious to learn more, I really recommend the work of Georgina Klieg, and that's spelled, her last name is K-L-E-E-G-E, if you're interested in learning more. So I began doing research, and I learned that while there are describers who think really critically about what they do, there's a really wide range of approaches and in my mind, quality. And there's also an equally wide range of preferences around description. So the conventional standards for audio description only really satisfy one small part of that spectrum. And so yes, for myself, like, even as I advocate for like the basic considerations of standard access measures in art spaces, I personally really want more, and I want access that is thoughtful, and I wasn't finding that in a lot of traditional description. And I also want access that, you know, enhances an artwork ideally, and even more radically, access that is an artwork or drives the making of an artwork, like what Alexis was describing, something that shapes work from the beginning. And I also just want to shout out to Emily Cook, who's been a really great conversation partner around this and is very articulate about these issues. But eventually I had the very basic realization, which a lot of others have had too, that description is essentially a form of translation between the senses. And this has been just a really helpful framework. So I started to use the term sensory translation to describe this thing that we can do in consideration of the different ways that people experience the world. And I just, you know, translation has this long history, and I'm very considered ethics and aesthetics, but I also, coming to this as a layperson, realized that while some people have a very special relationship with observation and language, other people are simply able to see and describe what they are seeing. And so I came at this, you know, with the question of whether this was something we could do for each other as lay people and also as experts. So I started in my work around description by creating videos specifically made for audio description. And I hired poets and writers and dancers and others to describe them. And then this practice of hiring so-called experts of different kinds to create experimental description for my own work led to invitations to take a similar approach to artwork that was held in permanent collections. And that's been really gratifying. And I continue to learn and play and experiment with it. And last fall, I began taking more of a DIY approach, inviting people to describe the scene of a feature-length film for a piece that's screened in a cinema without the projection. And this winter and spring, I worked with community members, multiple people per artwork, to walk through a description process. And I wove these recordings together into a whole so that there was a series of polyvocal descriptions of abstract paintings. And just working on some projects for 2021 that are driven by other points of access, low sensory access and fragrance-free or toxicant-free access, in the hopes of facilitating my own and others' participation in galleries and public space. And so just as a final thought, like, I think anyone who experiences barriers knows that a lot of access involves day-to-day, often scrappy problem solving, at least that's my experience, and a willingness to not be hindered by conformity, or what I've heard called the tyranny of the normal, which I think is an apt description. And I feel like disabled artists have amazing skills to respond to barriers and create creative and pleasurable points of access.
Thank you so much for that. In our conversation, in my conversation with both of you over the past little while, I know that you both sort of position your research into access as sort of experimental. And I was curious to hear from both of you about sort of the possibilities that you see when you're approaching access from an experimental perspective, but also some of the ways that you might bring some caution into an experimental practice.
Yeah, thank you so much for this question. I've been thinking a lot about this lately, and unfortunately, there can be a tendency to focus on the ways that access measures benefit abled people too. And that's often something that's shared in the context of trying to motivate institutions and governments to invest in access and really consider access. And, you know, like, while it's often very true that non-disabled people benefit from access measures for disabled folks, it's definitely not always true. It's not true across the board. And in fact, access conflicts are a really real thing where, you know, for instance, what I need as a point of access might create a barrier for you. And so anyhow, you know, considering access shouldn't be motivated by the enjoyment and benefits to the majority or to the non-disabled people alone. And so, yeah, but it often is. And so access can be put in place in ways that decenter the people that it's supposed to serve, and it can almost become co-opted even. So when it comes to experimental approaches to access, I feel like what can happen is there can be a lot of excitement around what this offers to people who don't depend on this access measure, and it might be put in place in a way that it actually isn't functional as a point of access for those who need it. And this was highlighted recently in an article by Emily Watlington in Art in America. I think that was back in February. So an example might be experimental forms of description that don't actually describe the nuts and bolts of what something looks like. So, you know, like, some people really prefer the kind of conceptual, poetic end of this, of what I think of as the visual description spectrum, where there might not actually be a description of what something looks like. And some people actually see that as a powerful decision to kind of subvert visual primacy. But there are also others who really prefer traditional description, and who will tell you that at the end of the day, if a description doesn't communicate what something actually looks like, it's really meaningless as a point of access, which is totally fair. So this is something I'm always negotiating in my work with alternative description. And in each project I've done, I've experimented with different ways of trying to weave in standard description or aspects of standard description. For example, by working that into the title of a piece and making that available in audio. And sometimes I've done this more successfully than others. So actively consulting with people in the blind and low vision community and people who regularly use audio description has been really key. And to be honest, I didn't do enough of that in the beginning. And so another thing that has been really important is to make it abundantly clear that what I'm offering is experimental, so that a person knows what it is that they're signing up for and can really consent to the experience and choose whether or not they want to partake in it.
I find a lot of what you just said to be very relatable, especially the emphasis you put on consultation during your experimental process with Access as being really important, because for a long time I let my art practice be biased by my own body and experiences, but I quickly discovered that by consulting with or learning and creating and exhibiting with disability art and artists, that it's absolutely key in expanding inclusivity and learning more ways to make your work as accessible as possible in these creative ways. I learned that no art or art venue can be 100% barrier-free, and I think that frees us up to take risks in experimenting with Access, because I don't think we have anything to lose as long as we don't lose sight of the underlying goal, which is to create increased opportunities for access. I'm going to continue with Aislinn's example of the audio description, because I very recently for this show had an experience with it that was a really big learning curve for me. During my residency, researched audio description extensively, and then attempted to write and record my own audio description for the Tending to performance in the exhibition. I realized very quickly that as a sighted person, despite all of the research I had done, I really didn't know what needed to be included in my audio description. And had I done that audio description entirely myself, which was initially the plan, it wouldn't have created a mode of entry for a blind and low vision audience. It may have in fact created an additional barrier. And so that was a place in this exhibition where I needed to let go of my creative reins a little bit and seek the advice of people who knew more than me. In the end, the way I exhibited or experimented with Access in this exhibition wasn't through audio description, because it really needed to serve a direct purpose. But instead, I experimented with Access through an installation that incorporated and sort of drew inspiration from audio description. So the makeshift exhibition spans 2 galleries at Artspace. And the space where Tending to and its audio description is projected is at the top of a set of stairs in a gallery. I've painted those stairs yellow, and they are barricaded. And then next to the stairs, you can see large vinyl printed verbs that have been plucked from the audio description. And then the only place where the entire performance can be viewed is on the online component of the exhibition. So I guess essentially by creating this art performance through a lens of accessibility, I ended up with an installation about where access isn't, if that makes sense. And yeah, so to me, I guess this is a long way of saying that experimenting with access is a kind of continual learning. And it does present a lot of exciting opportunities. But I hope that that willingness to learn and experiment with access doesn't fall on the shoulders of artists and people viewing the art who need those tools. I think this pandemic has made a lot of art institutions rethink some of the typical events, like the art opening, and have had to curate access and experiencing art in new ways. And for that, I think I am very cautiously optimistic.
Yeah, I think I share your cautious optimism as well. Something you said, Aislinn, at the beginning of your reflections on experimental practice is this making sure that access is not positioned in terms of how it will benefit large groups of people. And perhaps that's where some of the conversation has been in the context of COVID-19, is like, you know, these were measures that were advocated for many years by disabled artists and disabled audiences. And so as we move forward and think really creatively about how, as art galleries and institutions, we can facilitate better access with our programming. I think those like more individualized access points are going to be really important, and that it isn't about, you know, advocating for what's going to work for the most amount of people. As you said, Alexis, access being, you can't remove every single barrier. So meeting someone on an individual level is probably where we're gonna, you know, make the most strides and welcome people in if we are able to meet them where they are. That's certainly something I've been reflecting on recently. So I think we'll jump into the workshop, Aislinn, if you're ready for that. I would love for you to just give us an idea of the goals of the project that you've developed, and then, of course, how folks can participate with us in this project.
Sure. So the title is Archive of Sensation, and I think of it as a participatory project, and I guess the goals are really the goal is really to create a record of sensory experiences. And in this case, experiences of Alexis's Remodel series, which is the series with drywall that Alexis was describing earlier. And although it's inspired by sensory translation and experimental approaches to access, I really see it as research versus an access measure in itself. And that has a lot to do with what we were talking about earlier. Just to be abundantly clear that it's very experimental. I think maybe we'll know at the end what we can learn about it and apply to, or learn from it to apply to access. But Alexis has done a really thorough job of providing solid, functional, and thoughtful points of access into her exhibition. And so this is another layer. And it's driven by curiosity about what an artwork does in the world. And sorry, I lost my place. What an artwork does in the world, how it is experienced in person versus in virtual space, and how we can communicate about art. And I'm also curious about if and how access might be informed by this kind of inquiry. So, you know, the question is, what is it? And to put it simply, the basic instruction or invitation is to describe what you see or feel when experiencing Remodel. or what you see or feel when you're experiencing other descriptions of remodel. So the very first step is to choose. Do you want to experience remodel, or do you want to try to respond to one of the descriptions of remodel? And once you've made that choice, you can either go to the gallery if you can in person to see and even touch the work, because Alexis and Hannah have made that an option. And either in person or online, you can also see the work and access the visual description of the Remodel series. So step 2 is to describe what you see or feel. And this can be in virtually any format. You can write, take a photo, record a voice memo, draw, share a video. And I do have some more detailed prompts, because describing what you see or feel might be too broad of a place to start from. But to give you some more sense of direction, you could choose one or several or none of these following ideas. So here's some possibilities. You can describe what you see, hear, feel, or touch. If you're at a distance, can you imagine what it would feel like to touch this sculpture? What is the texture, the temperature, the shape, the weight? And what do you notice? Is anything surprising? Or is anything familiar? What does remodel, or this response to remodel, remind you of? What does it make you feel? If you're drawn to movement, touching with your eyes, can you take the work into your body? Does it translate into a movement or gesture, or series of movements or gestures? Or a way of holding or being in your body, or a way of interacting with another object or thing? So those are some ideas you could play with. And then the final step is to share your response. So on the website below this video, there are 2 ways to do this. There's a link to a Google form that will lead you through a series of steps. And there's also an email address. And in both cases, you can indicate if you'd like your response to be anonymous, or if you'd like to be credited and what name you'd like to use. And these responses will be shared on the gallery's Instagram account and on this webpage, and they'll hopefully grow and accumulate and create this archive. So lastly, I just want to thank you for trying this and for sharing your experience. And if you have any feedback about what it's been like, please do share that too as part of your response in the Google form or by email.
Yeah, thank you so much, Aislinn. I think I'm really excited to see what folks come up with, and I'll just echo, you know, our thanks for folks who do contribute, and to thank you both as well for working so hard on the show and this workshop in particular. I think it will be really fun.